Thank you, Graham. Lovely to be here. I'm Carla Rapoport, and I had the idea 14 years ago that the world needed a digital art prize. How did I get that idea? I'm not sure. I was a financial journalist, so I had no qualifications whatsoever. I went to the Hockney show at the Royal Academy in 2012, the bigger picture, 4 times, and I kept finding people looking at iPads saying, how did he do that? And it just occurred to me that it wasn't only David Hockney who was doing that. And I went to a lecture by something called the Computer Arts Society at college, some basement lecture. And there were all these people there that had been doing this for decades. And it wasn't new, and it had an amazing history. And I met the incredible Nick Lambert, who is here, still incredible, and formed a connection to this group. And I'm very, very grateful for it. The prize kind of grew up as we did. Myself and Jack Addis, who couldn't be here tonight, we all kind of grew up with the prize. In the beginning, I had the idea that we'd pick winners, they'd all be output to print, they'd all have their nice little flat images that you would print, and then there'd be an auction, and you'd sell them, and you'd put it all on a USB stick, maybe with some moving image, and you'd go around the world showing it to people. Well, that was wrong like almost immediately, because things like 3D interactive, stuff you could touch, stuff that was augmented reality, what was that? And all kinds of things happened along the way. So the Lumen Prize exhibition got very complicated, and things came in, and I went and looked at them and say, this is so weird. And then you'd look at the CV of the artist who did it, and you go, this is amazing. Because you'd look at what this artist had done, Andy Lomas, I'm thinking about you. You'd look at what they'd done, Cambridge mathematicians, all kinds of amazing qualifications in 17 different fields. And you realize that it had come together, their work, through expressing themselves creatively. So this mixture of art and technology just kept growing and growing. The prize kept growing and growing, and in a wonderful way. So we that to do stuff, and his stuff now has been in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it's become a big deal, which is just wonderful. I've had the, some of you know, I've had the, okay. I've had the happy result of being able to step back, which is lovely for me. It means I have more time for, I don't know, going on holiday and things like that. But I'm still luckily emeritus, so I'm still around and haven't been asked to come and do things like this. So we're going to have a Where Are They Now panel with some of our past stars. And they're right here. Where are they now? They're right here. And then we're going to, after the panel discussion, we'll open it up for questions to all of you. Anything that you have based on what they said, or really any questions about the Lumen Prize. I guess I should say a little bit about the Lumen Prize now, which is that it's opening up a studios arm. And that's very exciting, and there'll be more news about that at the end of August. Space has been hired and work is going to be installed. So London will have its first Lumen Studios. We'll be hearing more about that soon. Very exciting development, and this is thanks to our new partners, much more than one person could do in the Wales. So it's very great to have partner, and very great to have people that want to make this prize into something more than just a prize. It always has been, as Andy has said, more than a prize, but having a space that has its own is very exciting for all of us to create. So, without further ado, I will turn it over to our first speaker. Andy, shall I introduce you?
Yeah.
Put my glasses on. Go ahead and clap if you want. Thank you very much. That's what I miss. I miss the clapping. Forget the rest of it. Okay. Andy Lomas is a computational artist, mathematician, and Emmy award-winning supervisor of computer-generated effects. His art explores how complex sculptural forms can be created by stimulating growth processes. Inspired by the work of Alan Turing and others, it exists at the boundary between art and science. In 2014, his work Cellular Forms won the Gold Award, the Lumen Prize Gold Award.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I guess And yeah, so it's been coming up to 10 years since I was fortunate enough to win the Lumen Prize. And I guess one thing I really think about it with Carla and Jack, everyone, was it really seems to be like the prize that just keeps on giving. That, the number of things like this to come along and talk and reflect on the work, as well as opportunities to show pieces over the years. It's just been so much more than just rocking up one evening and getting a certificate and some money, which is great. Thanks Carla, thanks everyone involved in Lumen. And it feels like this fits almost like in 10 years later, still involved, reflecting on it. So just bits about almost like my work and what's okay. I pressed the button and the screen changed there, but it's not.
Okay, that pops up again.
Okay. Coming up.
It's not coming.
Is it not working?
No? Our technology does not want to play nice with us today. That's all right.
So, everyone's meant to be interacting with that, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Show anybody for any reason. Why would you try to show anything to anybody? Fail. This is why I use my. No one's getting a logo. It's always terrible.
I'm not really Oh, Miller's amazing, yeah. Yeah.
It's going to bring one of those old projectors Friday and just have slides and then whiteboard under your control. Yeah.
That's all right.
You arrange much time and it's probably not going to be that easy.
That morning you'll get an email. It's been sent like about 5 a.m. or something, around 1 in the morning. She only ever sends emails though.
Hello, by the way. Yeah, sorry. Simon.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
So you, Randy,
Never misses them.
a fan or work in the field?
I'm a forklift operator.
Okay.
Operator by the death service around. But at night, Evolutional Enterprises. Not that weird in this context, but really.
I was asking your accent.
Gothenburg, Sweden.
Okay, that was what I was wondering.
Hey, so, Randy Lomas. It's just a little bit closer to 10 years since I got the Lumen Prize than so let's this has been really nice sort of opportunity to reflect, I guess, back on the piece that I was fortunate enough to win the Lumen Prize 10 years ago, but also guess my practice as a whole and what has happened since. So I'm going to be trying to be quite quick about this because I've only got 5 minutes. But basically, this is the work that I won the Lumen Prize 10 years ago. It's a piece called Cellular Forms, and it's basically, I guess, very much inspired by biology, but I think it's a piece of art is being, what I'm trying to do is explore what happens through biological processes. What sort of, basically, what sort of forms and structures can we create by simulating things like biology grows cells? So things like light rays come in and hit cells and that generates food, and cells need a certain amount of food before they split into 2 cells. So it's modeling biological-like things, but I'm not trying to be accurate biology. And then exploring, I want to be really surprised by what happens, just like, it's almost like this is hopefully a rich set of ingredients. So it's a bit like working with unruly medium, a bit like clay and things like that. I'm just wanting to explore it, find what happens, find what can be created with it. And, it produces actually something, a sort of genuinely surprising range of different structures and forms from some things which, this is just springs moving around white balls in space. But almost starts becoming maybe a bit disgusting. That there's actually something quite visceral that I think, particularly attuned to these biological, organic things. So that's the sort of space that I'm trying to, I guess, explore. Okay, so yeah, big questions. If I'm talking about like, what is it that inspires me? I guess there's things about like, nature works with these sort of rich, unruly, complex systems making amazing things we see in natural forms. Can we create with things as well like that, rather than just like looking, oh wow, it's a beautiful tree and things? So I guess that's the sort of big questions I've got. It's almost like saying nature has this idea of systems of interconnected things that almost produce rich, amazing behavior, but then that has to be coupled with something that almost like directs that. So in nature is evolution with like, survival of the fittest and, basically making this unruly system do, like directed things. A lot of my practice is about, okay, how do I work with that as a artist? How do I work with that aesthetically? How do I work with that, not just trying to simulate biology? I want to, see things and just almost like react to them and, but also be able to tease things out, explore this space of possibilities. And I guess maybe an analogy was like working with slightly unruly materials, I think, in a lot of fine art. It was like things like clay and sculpture out of marble, and it's working with things actually quite difficult, and you need to learn about what it does to be able to, and that's actually, I think, a really important part of the process, what makes it a lot more interesting. It doesn't give you things for free, it's not easy. But you need to learn and explore with it. So it's almost like I'm using computation to build that rich, unruly system. And then there's a lot of what I do is then working with, what's that backstory, what I do is tools to ways of exploring, ways of finding the moments of unexpected things in these spaces. So I've done quite a lot of different systems over the years. So, sorry, wrong computer. That's why it's not coming up the next slide. And also other things about these sort of systems where often small changes can do really big things. So like there's cellular forms, then shortly after that, I then did a very slight change to it. Where basically light rays, instead of coming from all directions, what happens if they only come from one direction? And suddenly you get this really different set of things happening. So these are called plant forms, where it is exactly the same code as the previous stuff you're seeing, but light rays only come from the top, so things only grow towards upwards, and you get these sort of almost like tree-like, fungal-like, very different sort of forms and structures. Then a thing called hybrid forms, which was saying, well, what happens with more than one cell type? And very small changes to what's going on. And suddenly it's making things almost look more like animals. It's like little sea creatures and embryos and really rich, complex things. But also problems with this. Actually, I'm going to come back to this system for more work, because there's almost like a thing where it looks like embryos and then everything sort of stops being that interesting, almost goes out of control. Which I think then raises the next level of interesting questions of like, well, how do I carry on influencing this? What's the next things? But I'm now starting to get some more ideas about. So I want to go back and revisit this with the different things. There's another series called vase forms, which was like looking at, can I actually make these into real sculptures? Can I actually 3D print this? Where one of the big things is, if you're 3D printing, generally you can't have things with too big overhangs, or you have to build lots of scaffolding if things have overhangs. Okay, well, that's an interesting constraint. So what happens if I build that into this? If I say, make the system grow differently depending on how much of an overhang there is. So maybe that could influence things so that it doesn't almost like engineering-wise, force everything to be 3D printable, but it influences things in a way where maybe lots of things might be 3D printable. And this is the sort of thing I, again, got from that system. So it's almost like looking at the constraints of 3D printing, let's make that part of the system. And then actually, then made things that I could fabricate into sculptures. So this was actually from an exhibition at the V&A as part of London Design Festival, and this is the ZKM. And I guess what I quite like, they had sculptures, but they also had animations. There's a process, there's a simulation of biology going on, and they wanted to show both. So it was almost like, here are the final forms, but here's, how it's developed, almost how it's gone from this embryo-like cell to becoming these sculptures and forms with hopefully intricate complexity. So I know I've got to very quickly wrap up, but basically, there's quite a lot of other directions I've gone in over the years with this. One thing I'm particularly interested in taking further is that one down the bottom called digital chemotaxis, which is an idea about how, actually based on how social amoebae work with each other to make, organising colonies, which was inspired by talking to a professor of biology up in Dundee. And it's one thing I've started experimenting with, and it's almost like jaw-dropping how much rich, unexpected behaviour it has. The final thing I wanted to mention, though, is actually here. So actually, I've just been presenting earlier today about some of the latest work I've been doing, which is a collaboration together with some researchers in Oxford who are looking at, actually how things happen in really early embryos. And I've actually got like an interactive small installation in the communal area. So when you go out and have your wine, that Graham mentioned earlier, please try this out. This is almost like still a bit of a prototype. I'm still trying things out to see what works. I'm interested in getting feedback from people, but 10 years after cellular forms, okay, here's a thing, and it's a 3D stereoscopic. It interacts, you move controls, there's audio, you can hear 250 cells all making different sounds. It's a bit noisy. Hopefully it's an interesting thing, but yeah, you're trying it. Let me know what you think.
Next up is Brendan Dawes, who is a UK-based generative artist. He qualified for the Lumen Prize shortlist in 2021 and also the longlist in 2022 for a two-timer. By means of code data and generative systems, Brendan's interest in human connection is revealed across electronic objects, screens, physical sculpture, and interactive installation. His artwork 313 was the shortlisted piece for the come down from Liverpool.
Only got 4 slides, so. Yeah, it should play, I think. It should play video. So, yeah, let's go.
Perfect, all right.
Yeah.
So it's just that.
All right, okay. Hello, everyone. Really lovely to be here. I think, as Andy was saying, when you become part of the Lumen Prize, you become like almost a member of a family. Maybe it's a dysfunctional family, I don't know. We're a family all the same, and it's a really nice family. But I was honoured to, I was longlisted, I've been longlisted twice and shortlisted once, and I've never won, but I won't let it make me bitter. But over 25 years I've made all kinds of digital work, but I wanted to really concentrate on the 3 things that are Lumen related. And the first one is, so a lot of my work is, I work with data, but I'm not a data visualization person. I have this phrase, data by itself is not enough, data needs poetry. By that, I mean it kind of needs this romance, I think, to be able to tell a story. My background many, many years ago was, I had a digital design company in Manchester, and we worked for big brands and we told stories for brands. So I kind of come from that background, even though I was always a geeky programmer. So this was one of the pieces that kind of changed the direction of my kind of aesthetic, actually, in 2019. In 2018, I kind of got bored with my work. And I then discovered this thing called Houdini, which I'm sure many of you know, and which was being used by my peers. And I thought, wow, that looks cool, and you can program in it. So I thought, I'm going to learn how to use it. And I'm still learning now. So back into the Christmas of 2018, I started to delve into it. In January 2019, I got a call from a marketing company, and a client commissioned me to make a work called The Art of Cybersecurity for this company called Trend Micro. And they're a big cyber security company, one of the biggest in the world. and they wanted 6 different artists to create some work based off their cyber attack data. Now, when you think of cyber attack companies, you're probably going to think, right, it's probably going to be on black, it's going to have some techno soundtrack, it's going to be really macho, everything I kind of stand against, right? So I created this work. There is sound on this, but I don't think it's fine. Imagine a beautiful piano track. So there's like 350,000 things. So this is basically, you're looking at a spreadsheet, effectively. But what I wanted to do was tell a story. I said I wanted to show the network that protects the system. So that's this thing. I didn't want it to look like how you would think of a network. And then I wanted to see the threats. So all the threats come in here. So this is all from data. So it's populating this mesh, trying to attack the system. But then I said, why are we doing this though? We're doing this so we can carry on being creative with our day. We can still be brilliant at our jobs. We can still do that spreadsheet for the boss or whatever it is. So I wanted a representation of how you show, that we're still okay, with all these threats are coming in, it's protected the system, and all this beautiful stuff is still managing to happen. And so you can see that the threats have now kind of been neutralized and the white, and they've kind of been nullified. So this was like a 4K. So when I did this work, I told the client I'm going to use this thing called Houdini. They had no idea I'd never used it before. This was the first thing I ever made in it. And so basically lie to clients is my, no, but you bring them on board and, they were like up for it. So I think, when you get commissions like that, they have to be as creative as you oftentimes to like take that leap. So that was in the Lumen Prize long listed, I think in 2019. So the next one, I'm often using, the way I look at data, I think is a very open-ended and it's not data as you think as data often. It's everything in this room is data. Me talking now is data. The amount of people in this room, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm also working with, obviously, a lot of Lumen Prize artists using a lot of technology. This thing called AI, and this was back in 2021, maybe. There was a thing where you could strip out people's bodies using AI from images and you could just have the figure. And I thought, because I'd done a lot of work with film before this, I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we stripped out all the bodies and the forms from the end scene of Kill Bill Volume 1? Basically, I need more friends. So I did this thing and it stripped out all the bodies, which would, otherwise be very painstaking to do. And I created this work called Black Mamba's Revenge, and it was a still. And so what you're seeing there is the entire fight scene at the end of Kill Bill Volume 1. And there's a reason why that's red there, is because, if you've seen the film, spoiler alert, there's a sword involved in someone's arm. So, and so that's that whole sequence. Now, you cannot tell it's that sequence. I don't care. I'm trying to make something abstract, trying to make you see things in a different way. The idea of making the familiar strange again is kind of key to the kind of work that I do. So that was shown, that was long listed for the Lumen Prize, which I was very happy about. And then the final piece is the one that was shortlisted. So I think, that often with data and things, it can mark a moment in time. And there's often real sort of big events, big world events, life events, where you remember where you were at that time. And one such thing of people of a certain age is the assassination of President Kennedy. And there's, of course, this famous footage, the Zapruder footage. And apparently there's this frame 313 is like the frame where, not to get too gory, there's a lot of blood in my talk, I don't know why, but that's the headshot basically on that frame. So this frame 313, and people have written things about it. So I thought I would take that, and this is that moment where Kennedy is in the back of the car there. You can kind of make him out, and then this time basically then, this is like an amazing moment in history. It's written about and everyone knows about. So I wanted this idea of like this thing would just perpetuate throughout our lives. and it would just continually exist, which is what fascinates me with time and data and all those things. So I think that's about it for me, but during the panel, I'll give you an update on what I do now. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Brendan. Now we have, it's my pleasure to introduce Nye, who's standing right here. Thompson, an artist turned software designer turned artist. Her work spans image making, video and sculptural installation, filmmaking, artwork, mapping, experimental software, architecture, and process-based performance. A very hyphenated person.
I love a hyphen.
Nye and Eva Morgan were recipients of the 2021 Gold Award for their short film, Uninvited.
Thank you so much, Carla. Yeah, that's my opening. So I'm afraid, unlike Brendan, I have 30 slides, so this is going to be like a turbocharged journey through. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of take you through the kind of one of the central narratives of my work, which is also very closely tied to the amazing relationship that I've had with Lumen over the years. So let's go. So hold on a sec, where are we? Up, down? On this. Right. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm just scrolling, sorry. Okay, so about me, but then Carla's just said that, so I'm going to whiz straight into the work and go straight into what was, when I guess it was my sort of first key piece of work after finishing my master's and becoming an artist again. And it was also, in fact, the first shortlisted Lumen piece I had. So that's a really good place to start because, in fact, this piece, Backdoored, kind of set the stage in terms of process and material for a large amount of my career. So I'd just come out of the like the software industry, sort of back in the sort of early teens, and there was a lot of conversation about the Internet of Things. I was very interested in the idea of what it means to kind of make all the objects around you smart. And I was like, okay, I want to make some art about this, but it's not an easy thing to make an artwork about, right? You know, back then, particularly in the sort of regular art world, not many people sort of knew what the Internet of Things was, and it was very hard to talk about. And then I kind of had this realization, sort of discovery that, of course, objects connected to the Internet of Things are also become searchable, and the sort of the searching and sort of security testing of those objects can also produce images. So typically sort of images taken through unsecured security cameras. So I discovered this sort of source of images through these sort of in these search engines, and I was just amazed by, I guess, by the content and the aesthetics of all these images, which were kind of, I guess, sort of a global mapping of the sort of world's anxieties, the sort of things that people are anxious enough to want to put a security camera on, and also a kind of map of a sort of complex process of human failures, because these images should not have been kind of, you know, shared on the internet in the first place. But so I set up my kind of first experimental software pipeline, this sort of pipeline which collected these images from the search engine and archived them, and I spent ages every day looking at them. So that was the beginning of Backdoored, and I made this sort of early installation, which was really about the kind of surveillance and the kind of experience of being watched, our kind of, you know, where we sit in this kind of space of, you know, the sort of where we're all sort of complicit in watching each other. So I made that piece, but I worked with these images for ages because I was so fascinated by them, because they're sort of images which are not just images, but they are documents of process. And I really like images where the kind of content resides in the process as much as the kind of visual. But what I became really interested in was the kind of quality to all of these sort of security camera stills, which were images created without any real human agency, and I started thinking a lot about this. So you've got this sort of situation where you've got this dumb security camera watching the world and recording what it sees, and then you've got this software algorithm, like sort of scouting the internet. So this is the one thing has just got an eye, and then the other one has the algorithm has got a kind of movement and purpose. And when the algorithm finds the security camera, they come together just for like fraction of a second and just for a very fleeting time, it's like almost a new creature is born that has like vision and purpose. And then these images are actually a record of that sort of brief coming to life of this kind of strange dyadic creature. So that kind of really has sort of informed so much of my thinking since. I've spent, in fact, a lot of my career has been looking at these kind of strange images and thinking about them in different ways. So yes, I became very interested in this idea of an emergent machine gaze. And then from that, I was like, okay, machines are watching us. And I started thinking about what they saw and how they were learning to interpret that vision. This was back in 2018. And this was my second shortlisted piece. So I made this kind of synthesis called The Seeker, which was a kind of concept of this sort of AI type creature that traveled the world virtually, looking out through security cameras and using sort of image recognition systems to kind of understand what it saw, or to analyze what it saw. And I was very interested in, it was almost like a kind of reverse engineering of image recognition systems. I was very interested in if machines were learning to interpret things, what are they learning to see? How are they learning to describe the things they see? What things do they see? What things don't they see? Those kind of questions. And I named them after, the project after the Egyptian god Tarseka, who brought, in the Egyptian mythology, he brought the world into being by speaking the names of the things he saw. And I thought that was a kind of interesting analogy to how machine vision might start to change our own vision. This was the piece that was shortlisted the second time. So this is in the V&A, and it's actually a kind of map, all the things that the Seeker saw over its sort of 2-year journey around the world. So this crazy big flowchart, it was a mad thing to make. But I sort of, having made that, I was like, okay, but this is very abstract. It's just a piece of paper. And I spent a lot of time explaining to people exactly what it was I'd made. And I thought, okay, how can I then activate this process and kind of locate the viewer within it rather than just have like a piece on a wall that people were looking at? So this was my first thing when I actually started. I've been thinking a lot about the machine gaze. And this piece was actually the first time I started thinking about making art for machines. So I used the same kind of systems, and I made these little guys, Seeker bots, these little robots. And they were basically little robots, and which were looking at images of other machines, captured by machines, and they were analysing them in real time, and then they were whispering about what they saw. So, and it was really fun as well, because it was a live process, if you kind of stood in front of them, they would whisper about you too. And they would kind of try and analyse you. So I thought so the idea was it was an exhibition kind of primarily for a machine audience, but humans could go along and take part if they wanted as well. There's a sort of slight detour, but again, a key part of my journey with Lumen was the first kind of big public commission that I got via Lumen, which was absolutely wonderful. This was for the Barbican, and it was in response to ideas of Britishness just after the Brexit vote. And I made this piece. It was my first piece using Google Earth, and it's this endlessly looping tour around the British sea borders, just loop going round and round and round, a kind of endless patrol, but created using Google Earth. So it kind of has the quality of looking like, kind of like reality, but, and then it breaks into sort of heavy glitches, and you realise that it's a very manufactured introduction. Now, I think I can just play you this? Oh. No? No. Oh, I hoped I'd be able to just show you a little bit of the footage. Right, that video. Oh, it's because it's sharing a different screen, isn't it? Okay, maybe I can show people later because I know we're on a tight time scale. Kind of easier to see than explain.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well done, Kate.
Yeah, good work. Right. No, not that one. Okay, and then I can just go on to. Okay, well, I think you kind of saw it. It's okay, so, yeah, you can see that it's this sort of slow cascade of water down the screen. It's 6 hours long, and it's strange, because it goes right the way around the coast, right? And it's strange and kind of beautiful. It has that thing that satellite imagery has, that quality of aestheticizing everything. I'm very interested in that kind of quality. So, hold on a sec. How am I getting back? Sorry.
That preview, that one.
Okay, hold on a second. If I just. Okay, so moving quickly on to Uninvited, which is again following this idea of making art for machines. This was the piece that thrillingly won the Lumen Gold Award back in 2021, and it was a collaboration with Uber Morgan. And we, in fact, used these images that I've been collecting previously from Backdoor to create the world's first horror film kind of for and by machines. So it's a short film, and the idea, it's like a sort of emergent network monster that's scanning the world for the first time and trying to make sense of what it sees. And it uses, it's using a whole set of the sort of whatever machine analysis software was available at the time in order to try to claw out meaning or purpose from images. So I think there's probably no point showing it because the sound is really nice, and let's just move on. But I can give you a link so you can watch the film later if you want. And now I'm going to quickly zoom through my most recent piece, which I made early last year, called See You Soon. So, and it's about my fascination with satellites, which really came out of my out of Insulae and this sort of idea of this vertical gaze. So, yeah, these invisible machines that see the world so intimately, that's a kind of map of roughly what's overhead in terms of satellites over us right now. A lot of stuff. And yeah, so I spent a lot of time thinking about the political power plays that they act out, because there's, as I'm sure you all know, there's just crazy political and commercial jostling going on out there. And I think about their long ghostly afterlife. And I designed some postcards to say hello to satellites, and I sent them out into space. These are, you can see the 5 postcards I made at the bottom. So we sent them out into space, exactly. They're little messages that I found on Twitter, little love messages that somebody had written to satellites. And they're actually images, again, from my archive, which are taken by machines. And I thought, okay, satellites might like to look at images taken by machines that are maybe like of other machines watching the skies. So I kind of thought about what a satellite might like to see. And I sent them these friendly messages. So the postcard images were transcoded into sound and then transmitted as analog radio signals. So 2 satellites picked up my messages and sent signals back down to Earth in response. And carried within these signals are my original postcards remixed. You can see in this is just me decoding the radio signal from the satellite and then me decoding the image on the right. But the images that I got back have been scrambled and reassembled into something completely new because they're analog images and they've been on this crazy journey into space and back. So the satellites and I have created something entirely new together. And here are some examples. So this is my postcard on the left and this is one of my responses. Here's another one. We set up a network of ground stations to pick up multiple signals and broadcast back from the satellites. Here's another one. So yeah, I love the idea that these postcards document their journey they've been on. And they're a kind of way of making some kind of contact with these machines, which are gone, it's a sort of fleeting connection with these exiled machines. This is it installed. You can see the radio signal and then the images being decoded. Here's a little synthesis of the decoding, but I think I'm probably well over time, so I'm going to stop. But thank you so much, and apologies for me.
So can I ask Carla? Okay, we're 15 or 20 minutes. I've got questions that I always like to ask, so I'll ask I'm the head of the panel, so I'll ask my questions first. And there'll be room for those of you in the audience who want to questions. Thank you very much, Nye, Brendan, and Dave. All of you have such creative minds. I guess I have 3 questions I was asking panel. One is, where do you get your ideas? What are your source materials? I'm interested in how AI has informed your practice at all. But I'm also interested in how Brendan talked about clients, but do you sell through galleries? Do you have collectors? Is there a culture of collecting this and what's happening? So those are my 3 questions. You can take them in any order.
Let's do the AI one. I actually very actively use machine learning in my work, but it's almost like a backstory. So actually, it almost feels like it's become a bit of a dangerous thing. It's almost like as soon as you say you're using machine learning, almost everyone assumes you're using Midjourney and generative AI, which has a really interesting but potentially difficult discussion to have. And that's not what I'm doing, but it's more like it's a collaborator that helps me navigate these spaces. It's almost like saying evolution is how nature works. I use evolutionary algorithm things, but they're actually really frustrating for some things. A lot of what I'm doing is using machine learning almost as a collaborator to help find the interesting niches in these spaces of things. So yeah, I've been using machine learning in various forms for 15 years, I guess. But it's a backstory almost, I feel, to what I do.
Interesting. Is it a backstory, Brendan and I? Do you have anything to say about it?
AI. Yeah, it's a tool that it's 2 things. It can be a subject for critique, like in something like the C where I was trying to kind of unpick the data and sort of impact. So it can be a subject. Sometimes I use it as a tool to kind of try to see the world in a different way. Sometimes I don't use it at all. See you soon. I made because I'm a bit bored working with AI. and I want to do something really analog, but I'm working with some AI stuff at the beginning at the moment.
And Nye told me she made a CD. That's very
I did.
very old school.
I know,
She's
it's
on
so old
Spotify.
school, isn't it? I'm on Spotify, yeah, you can look me up, or if you've got a CD player, I've got little CDs with little satellites on. It's the soundtrack, basically, from the See You Soon, which is, it's a sort of auditory reworking of the image itself, encoded into sound to send through space. So, yeah,
Brendan.
Instagram.
Yeah, no, I definitely, use AI like a tool, it's almost weird, it's almost become a collaborator. So I use it visually sometimes, but I also use it as like this developer that's there with me in my, I don't work with anyone, in where I work. So, like the other day, I wanted to build this website about the stuff I'd done, and that's what I used to do for money, right? But things have moved on so much. I thought, how do I like screen scrape, blah blah blah? And I fired up Chat GPT but we had the difference is. So I said, I want to make this, blah 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 blah, and he said, certainly, I'll show you how. And I knew that that isn't going to work because I had a technical. I know how things work, right? So, and I said, I've just tried that. Don't you need to make that a JavaScript object? And he went, oh yeah, you do. So I was then having this conversation where I was like saying, you were wrong there. You go, yeah, you were right, I was wrong. Do it like this. So then we were having this like amazing, so I built this website. It would probably have taken several days and did it in an hour. And it was, and so that for me is really good. It's really amazing. But what was amazing for me was I was having a conversation with this thing, and I was telling it where it was wrong.
It's like having a colleague.
It's like having a colleague, right? But one you don't have to buy a birthday cake for, so everyone wins.
Maybe you should.
Yeah, maybe you should. Yeah, so it opens up a whole, and then, would you not have paid? So I wouldn't have paid someone to do that job because I would have just done it myself. But then you get into a whole other realm of like, that's putting people out of jobs, which is going to happen, by the way. So I'm using it from a visual point of view as well. I think it's, opens up different avenues to explore. I think Andy constantly mentions like being surprised. I think all of us want to be surprised by our work with computers. We don't want to punch numbers at things in and then have it do what we want it to do. We want to be surprised by it, I think.
Fantastic. So, next question, how do you make your money? How do you make your living? You all do such esoteric work. Do you have collectors? Are institutions interested? Do you have gallery representation? I know the answer for Brendan is yes. Andy?
So I guess I make more money from the educator and working in collaboration projects. So it's like the project that's I'm showing out in the communal area here. It's funded as a public engagement project. So it's like together with this research group in Oxford, the Srinivas group, and they've got funding to do public engagement. And they basically said, hey, we're really much more interested in doing exploratory artwork, that we're interested in, and maybe can be quite provocative in discussions internally, than doing something that's just a very, very obvious to do public engagement thing. So it's sort of funded by that, and they're basically paying for materials, and there's artist fees and things like that.
Is there more of that than there used to be? I mean, is this an upward curve? Easier, just as hard? Or...
I don't know really, to be honest. I've had a number of projects. I guess I've been in a fortunate position that I've almost never had to apply for funding myself. I've always had people coming along, which has been some other artists, has been other collaborators, people I've already collaborated with, and they come and say, hey, I'm started working on this project, would you be interested in working on this too? Because often these are multidisciplinary, teams of people. So it's been more that side. I mean, I do have a few people who collect my work, but it tends to be, more small number. I don't have gallery representation, and I don't
but
have
you teach at Goldsmiths, right?
I used to teach at Goldsmiths. Now I'm a visiting research fellow, but I'm doing some teaching at Central St Martin's now.
Very good. Okay, Brendan, go.
I had clients for a long time. That's how I made a living. So, like you saw the art of cybersecurity thing, they would contact me and they would want me to make my work. They didn't want put their own aesthetic on it, which was important. I never pitched for work. And as I said, I came from the advertising world, but I knew how all that mechanism worked. I always refused to pitch, which agencies were like, found it bizarre. But I just stuck to it. And then, eventually things started to open up and with the digital art sphere, and that's all I wanted to do. So I then got collectors, and
NFTs.
through a lot of NFT stuff, and then through that, Gazzelli then got in touch with me, and I did a group show with them, and then a solo show, and then got representation with them. But I have to say, representation it's a wonderful thing, but it's not suddenly like sit back and here comes the money. It just does not happen like that. So don't think that representation is suddenly, it's suddenly all this money pours in. It doesn't. Yes, they represent you. They put you in front of their collectors, etc., etc. They speak to institutions. So that's good. But no, I still have to, generate my own revenue, whether it's through NFTs or selling prints or collaborating. As Andy said, it's. I was never a big collaborator. I was always like, God, just leave me alone. What do you want? I was like, but then I realised that actually most of my best work has actually been through collaboration. So the big one, that's kind of probably the biggest project I've ever been in is we've just done this documentary about Brian Eno with the director Gary Huswit, who I met in 2009 at a conference, and we became friends. And Gary in 2019 said he wanted to make a film that is different every time it's shown. Can you make it? When you get an email like that, you just say yes. You don't think about it, you just say yes. And so that then, we made this film. It's about to start its UK cinema run this weekend at Pitch House Cinemas, actually. But so it then got into Sundance, so we premiered it at Sundance, and it had a big UK premiere at the Barbican a few months ago, which was sold out, and Brian was there. So that, making that software to do that has been an amazing thing, but I haven't to make any real money from that, but it will come. But, so doing those kind of things is always being open to these collaborations. When I'm there at Sundance on the red carpet and I'm thinking, how the hell has this even happened? How is this possible? Because I'm just some idiot from near Liverpool, so it's just about being open to these things and basically saying yes.
Thank you.
I make pretty much all the money that I make through public commissions and public funding applications. And that's it really. Though I have to say collaborations I've found, so I do quite a lot of collaborations with, say, Uber Morgan and other artists, and then that also opens up the possibility to get funding from other countries, which is always nice. But that's my model. It's quite simple. There's it's not all of it, but it's that I know where the money comes from.
Is it getting any easier as visual art becomes more generally understood and stuff?
I think there are more opportunities, but it's really hard to tell. When you're just one person, it's like sometimes you're like, oh my God, there's nothing coming in, there's nothing, and then suddenly there's a million things coming in, and your personal journey is so like that. I find it quite hard to see a trend. I mean, instinct tells me that there are more opportunities.
All right, well, thank you, guys. We have 5 minutes there, is that right? For questions from the audience?
10 minutes. See how you do, 5 or 10?
5 or 10? It's questions or drinks, but. Anyone have anything to ask our panel?
Do you see a future in which digital art could accompany us in our homes, like traditional art? And how would that look like?
I have some in my home.
Yeah?
Yes, I used to do a lot more in selling prints. We got that, and actually I've got quite a lot of friends who've got prints of my work, and that feels nice, So I think I've moved now more into slightly crazy installations and things like that. But that's one thing I've been thinking back on. And I guess there's a slight problem with a lot of my work that sometimes it needs ridiculous amounts of computation. That's actually becoming, even in our Raspberry 5 actually can do a ridiculous amount. So that's something I'm starting to look back at, I guess, is other ways of, partly because somebody's going to say, could I have a version of that? And I'm having to think, how do I do that without it being like a crazy gamer level PC and this, that, and the other? Could this be maybe a slower work that becomes a more mounted thing, a thing that can be in people's homes? So yeah, I'm sort of readdressing, I think, that question.
I think, sorry, no.
Oh, no.
I think I kind of try and do both. People still love prints, right? Because putting something on a wall with a nail is really easy. Having a screen on a wall that you then have to power, or if it's like a computational real-time thing, then you've got to have a computer and all this. So, oftentimes with my collectors, there's a kind of bandwidth of like, so how do I put that on my wall? There's an education job to do. So sometimes prints that people still want. So I have like this NFT robot collection that I'm doing the second generation of, which takes the originals and makes them algorithmically and makes children. But people, and they collect them digitally, but people buy the prints as well. I have a mechanism where they can also buy the print, which is more revenue. But they all want them signed. They come with like a Verizar QR code on the back. They're not bothered. They want an analog signature to say, I've touched it. That's what the big deal is, right, for them when they own a piece of work. The other thing I would say with digital art is, I'm sure all of us have had conversations in the backs of taxis where someone says, what do you do? And you say, you're an artist. And I used to say I design things, and I just go for it, artist. And they go, what kind of work do you do? And then you go, oh, it's digital art. And they go, oh. I swear to God, they do that all the time, right? Because there's this idea of, we've got to move away from the idea of effort versus value, right? Because they go, oh, you just do that, and it's like, well, okay, so if I
do that 200 million times.
Yeah, that's okay, yeah, that's all right. So we've still got an issue with digital art, the idea of digital art. But yeah, some people do pay for it, thankfully, and some people do put it in their houses.
Yeah, I think kind of coming back to, I think there is something about the physical, tangible object and the sense of connection. When people want that sense, when people have an artwork, they want they want that connection with the artist. I think they want something, something the artist has touched, or it's a kind of pathway. So I think it's quite hard to replace the pleasure of that physical object. I mean, there's been amazing developments, haven't there, in sort of beautiful flat screens. So in theory, it's much easier to have a lovely video piece on your wall. But as Brendan says, so much harder to.
Can I ask, do you think it's to do with the public perception that if you have a print that's one of 5, then it's that, and that digital is infinitely reproducible because they can put any file on a memory stick and a hard drive and send it to friends?
It hasn't hurt photography collected, so it will happen. I've been having this discussion since I founded Lumen in 2012.
Yeah,
the very
okay.
first panel discussion was about.
Yeah, well, I still find that people want prints, my prints rather than my digital
They
file.
want the physical thing, but I have one of these screens in my sitting room, and I have 2 Lumen artists on it, and it stopped working last week. So I've now got to get someone to fix my screen. It just sad, yes.
So I just had a question that I think I forgot who said it, but about like effort. And I wondered whether you sort of felt that with digital art, you have to sort of prove that there's been sort of like some sort of process. And I'm not trying to judge I forgot the name of the artist who was recently at the Serpentine, but it felt like there was a lot of sort of, I've put effort into this. So there was sort of code streaming down the walls, and there was lots of, it was sort of to say as if like, here's
Not just beautiful pictures.
the marble on the floor because I've chipped it off the stone. And maybe I'm sounding a bit rude and I'm not grand enough to sort of pop a shot at these people, but I wondered, I guess what I'm trying to access is, do you feel digital art is having to prove itself in terms of effort, and does it deserve to say, this is the result? Does it matter how much rubble is on the floor?
I think there is, a very strong point there that, a lot of what people value is the sense of, obviously, the suffering artist, the effort. And I guess when I was saying, like, I've got a few people who collect, have done premium prints and things. A lot of those were actually people from the visual effects animation world that I used to work in. And I think part of that was they appreciate this is darn difficult, you know, the work is involved. It maybe isn't, you know, without me going, this is difficult, it's not an easy story, I think, for a lot of people. So yeah, that appears to be something that people do attach to. Yeah, a difficult to tell a story because almost everyone thinks, well, you just pressed a button and it was easy, wasn't it?
I think,
No.
yeah, I think there's also something about the marble on the floor. Everybody kind of broadly understands the process of making a marble sculpture, right? You know that if there is a marble sculpture, somebody sat there with a chisel doing this, or if you know there's a painting, somebody sat there with a brush doing that. And it's easy to kind of recognize and identify with what the artist has done. You know, if you know, just going through our works, the processes behind what we make are so wildly different that it would be very hard for somebody to kind of come and look at the pieces and unpick immediately, you know, what the processes were. And I think that opacity of process is kind of, yeah, perhaps it is still a challenge to, I don't know if it's a challenge to demonstrating the value, but in terms of communicating what the work is. Yeah, I think, you know, people do like to understand the story, and when people hear the story of how a work is made, you know, it means a lot to them. And in digital art, there's often a lot of work explaining the narrative and the process. You know, sometimes to the extent where you're like, I want you to just look at the piece. You know, don't ask me what processor I use. I don't want to talk about what software I use. Just look at the damn piece. But
There's also a gap in terms of just understanding the technology in terms of installation. For small institutions, they don't have the staff to maintain it. So I'm working with a small museum near where I live, and I say, well, look, I'll help you fund this, because I've set up a small award to help bring digital art to smaller museums is one of my ideas. And they said, but we don't have anyone to look after it once it's installed. So we can't have it. I mean, there's that gap, but that gap will close, I think, over time. I think people will get more comfortable with it.
Sorry, go on.
Okay, I was thinking, one thing that I think actually has changed and actually is raised in some of the discussions at EVA in the last couple of days, yesterday, was I think there's, you know, was a cultural problem that computers are generally seen as labour-saving things that take away jobs, make things cheaper. And, you know, there's a sort of talk about why is it that in the 1980s suddenly there was almost like this dip in, you know, what was seen as being valued digital work and things like that. I think it's a thing of the culture that that's when it came in. It became the thing that, you know, it's everywhere and it's just a labour-saving thing that, you know, we take the existing processes and make them quicker automated, rather than these are these rarefied machines that only there are a few dozen of in the country and they're ridiculously expensive. And whoa, a couple of art schools actually have a computer. Wow, and what, you know, what on earth are they doing with this? And so I think there's that cultural baggage that, you know, it's just repeating what can already be done, and actually it's devaluing an existing process rather than it's enabling something that's completely new to do, you know, that you doing things that you could not do otherwise. And that's, you know, and a valued thing.
Absolutely. There's a quote actually from the Brian. Obviously, I've watched a crazy amount of Brian Eno footage, but when he was there, it was some footage from the 70s, and I think it was another interview. And he was playing with his synthesizers, which hardly anyone was doing back then. And it was a really interesting quote that stuck with me. He says, "We've replaced the idea of skill with one of judgment." Because he said, anyone can bang some buttons on a synthesizer and make stuff happen. Because he says himself, he can't play the keyboard, he can't play piano, he can't play keyboards. So, which I thought was really interesting, because I thought, wow, maybe we're moving into that an era of judgment and taste is going to become more and more important, because they're the kind of things that you can't, you know, that's got to be like in you, I think.
One more question and
I
then,
just wanted to make a comment. I think that with this age of AI, so all the media arts are integrated. And if you look at, and the screen is still the key way of communicating these things ultimately. But if you look at screen arts, people are making billions. You know, the film industry, now they're a big, this huge collaboration, but it's still the fact that the people pay for a lot of money for this, the art that's a result of this integration of all the arts. You have sound, you have image, and so we're at a point where new ways of doing in this environment are going to emerge. So it's gonna change the economic aspects, I think.
I hope so. I think you're right, and it's an exciting time to be involved in all of this.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you to our panelists.